Hello and welcome to Crucible of Words for more dedicated legacy action. Today we are once again playing Turbo Depths. Now if you're unfamiliar with Turbo Depths, unsurprisingly it revolves around this card, Dark Depths. Essentially with this card and either Vampire Hexmage or Thespian stage you can end up with a Dark Depths that has 0 counters on it, so you get a 20/20 indestructible flying creature. Then we turn it sideways and our opponent dies. This deck is dedicated to making that happen. This is the best deck at making that happen. Like, there's lots of other decks that run it, things like Naya Depths and Lands decks. They have the ability to make 20/20 Merit. We, on the other hand, make it reliably as soon as possible and defend it. So, how are we doing that? Well, we've got 4 crop rotations, which is a pretty good way of finding any land you want out of your deck. We have 4 Sylvan Scrying, which does the same thing. And then we've got a bunch of Spirit Guides and Lotus Petals to give us the extra mana to either cast these spells or activate the Thespian stage, and so on and so forth. We've got a little bit of protection in the form of Stifle, which can stop Wastelands, which is obviously a slight problem for us sometimes. It can also stop people gaining the initiative. It can stop Solitude triggers from killing our Merit. So it does quite a lot of work here. We also Karakas, it stops Karakas activation, which is important. We also have 3 Pithing Needles, which can stop similar things. So this is almost always going on Wasteland, but sometimes it has other utility too. Then we've got a few Thoughtseizes to pave the way and make sure things are okay. And we have Not of This World. So this card is free and protects our creature if they are trying to kill it, because we'll have a 20/20, which certainly has greater power than 7. So this is free to cast, and the idea is we can stop a Swords to Plowshares or a Petty Theft or something like that from killing our creature. And then we can connect with it and win the game. Sometimes our opponents may have blockers, so we have a Sejiri Steppe to give our creature protection, which can be found at instant speed with crop rotation to protect from removal as well, or we can get it with Sylvan Scrying just to play at sorcery speed to push through blockers. We've got a few other utility lands in the form of a Bojuka Bog, which is just a turn 1 piece of Graveyard Hate we can get off of crop rotation for decks where we need that sort of thing. A Boseiju, which we can find with the Sylvan Scrying, which we can then use to blow up something like a Blood Moon, for example. And we have a Ghost Quarter, because we can't really play Wasteland because we're going to be putting Pithing Needle on Wasteland. So we have our Ghost Quarter, and this can blow up things like Karakas if our Pithing Needle is already on Wasteland. And then we have a Karakas of our own, because sometimes there's going to be some legends we need to bounce, whether they are things like Thalia, which is in the way of our sort of trying to play our little spells to get everything going, or it can be an opposing Merit, or it can be a Grizzlebrand, and so on and so forth. There's lots of things that this hits, and it's more or less free in our deck. Now, to help this all sort of come together, we've got a Rainbow Mana base because we're playing these blue spells and a couple of blue spells on the board. And then we've got these 4 Urborgs because Urborg plus Dark Depths casts Vampire Hexmage, which is pretty good. And it also means the limitation of Gemstone Mine kind of goes away, because by the time you get to using the last counters, you're either tapping it for black or green with Yavimaya or Urborg. Alternatively, when you remove the last counter, you can then crop rotate it away anyway. So there's quite a lot of little techie plays in the lands that are pretty nice. But that's more or less it for the main deck. We can't win without Merit, and that's going to be true in the sideboard as well. So how are we doing in the sideboard? The most important card to talk about today, I think, is Steely Resolve. There's a 2-mana enchantment. We play this, name Avatar, which is what Merit is, and it can't be the target of spells or abilities. So this stops Karakas, it stops Solitude, it stops all the removal. So the initiative deck, the way it beats the Dark Depths deck is it puts some pressure down, and then it says no whenever you try and make a Merit. It's either Karakas or removal spells or whatever. This stops all of them. So that's the plan for that. So if our opponents can't mess with our lands and can only remove our creature, Steely Resolve is going to be brilliant for that. We've got a couple of Flusterstorms, a bit more help for some of the combo matchups. Same with Leyline in the Void. It's going to be for the graveyard-based combo decks, whether that's Echo of Eon-centric decks or Reanimator, that sort of thing. This is the best way of Graveyard Hate. And Reanimator, they will remove it with Serenity, but it usually buys us 2 turns, which should be enough for us to get the win in, I would imagine. That's what happens most of the time. 3 Force of Vigors, things like Blood Moon exist, which is obviously not great for our Dark Depths. There's also a bunch of other little bits and pieces we might want to hit with this, and there's artifact decks running as a saga. There's painter decks where we need to make sure we take out the painter because they can race us, that sort of thing. We've got a couple of Dismembers because some creatures need to get killed, whether that's Magus of the Moon or Opposition Agent, and there's a few others that are essentials that we need to remove, really. So we've got a couple of Dismembers, and hopefully the Thoughtseizes can also come in under and get the things that we need to with the Dismembers, because we only have 2 of them because there's not a lot of room. We have this Tower of the Magistrate as well. So if our opponent is making lots of Thopters, for example, 8 cast with Psy in play, it's going to be very hard for us to punch through that with our 2020. That's where the Tower of the Magistrate comes in favour of the Sejiri Steppe quite often. Now, I'm not sure that this is good enough. I think I'd rather have another Dismember, but we're going to keep running it today and probably reappraise the situation for next time I run this deck. If you know my channel, you know I love playing Dark Depth strategies and I enjoy making 2020s. I did a whole playlist about it in December called Depth December. Check it out if you haven't already. All right, that's the deck. Before we jump into a league, like, comment, subscribe. These things cost you nothing and they help me out. I'm trying to hit 1,000 subscribers, so if you can help me hit 1,000, that'd be brilliant, because then I can get monetized and I can put some money into some really weird and wonderful decks. All right, let's jump into a Legacy League with Turbo Depths. Right, we have a turn 2 Marit Lage off of Urborg, Hexmage, and Dark Depths with 2 pieces of protection in the form of Stifle and Thoughtseize. So we can turn 1 Thoughtseize and hold up the Lotus Petal for Stifle, and then turn 2 make our guy. We're not in a terrible spot here at all. I quite like this hand. What is our opponent going to play? If it's a Chalice of the Void, that's a little bit annoying. Trinisphere, also kind of annoying. Sure. Now, we can get around this, but it's going to take us an additional turn. That's probably fine. We can't play out this Lotus Petal because of Trinisphere. They might struggle to deal with the Marit Lage when it comes in, but we're going to have to wait till turn 3 to do that. Now, if they play with something like a Blood Moon, then we're just in a spot of trouble there. This looks like we're going to be bringing in Force of Vigors post-sideboard. Obviously, that doesn't help versus Trinisphere, but... Okay, our opponent didn't have a land drop, which is interesting. So, I don't want to play out the Dark Depths and let them know what's going on. So, I'm just going to play out this Gemstone Mine. If we had something like a Elvish Spirit Guide, we could have played the Hexmage there. Our opponent probably knows what we are, because these two lands pretty much don't appear together apart from in Turbo Depths. Now, whether our opponent can do anything about that remains to be seen, because if they don't have a land now, then they're in a lot of trouble. A Blood Moon. That's a pretty annoying one for us. How do we beat Blood Moon? Do we beat Blood Moon? Okay, so our plan here is to play a Vampire Hexmage and beat our opponent down with it. Which is not a great strategy, but it's where we are. Oh wait, we can't even play it because everything is... We don't have any black sources apart from this Lotus Petal, right? We're going to continue playing this game until our opponent shows us a win condition. Because sometimes these prison decks can just flounder and not do anything. So if we'd have had an Elvish Spirit Guide instead of a Lotus Petal, we would have won this game by now. Okay, so we've got another one of these. We can play this out. And I think we're into making a 2-2 and beating them down for 8 turns. This is not necessarily a great way to win the game, and I don't necessarily think it's going to work. But our opponent has 1 mana at the moment under a Trinisphere, so... You know, you've got to do what you got to do sometimes to win a game of Magic the Gathering. Okay, so playing our lands out in case we get some ways of double spelling and things. If we get a Crop Rotation and a Spirit Guide, we can go and get ourselves a basic. Not that that's necessarily going to help us here, but it's something we can do. A City of Traitors, so we still only have 2 mana over there. There's a non-zero chance we end up hard casting a Not of This World this game, which would be wild. 6 turns for our opponent to keep bricking. It's quite a lot of turns, but it's possible. Okay, so they've got a land here. What have they got? Fable of the Mirror Breaker. Okay. We don't have blue to stifle this. Our creature does have first strike, though. Just keep attacking our opponent. There comes a point where this doesn't really do anything anymore, but if we can draw some more Hex Mages, we can put out a decent amount of threat there. I have to imagine our opponent's got cards they can cast, though. If not, they're at least going to find some soon with a Fable. But this matchup tends to be one that doesn't... Well, a lot of our matchups as Turbo Depths tend to not go that long. So it's worth playing it out. Now, if they play like a Rabble Master, then I think we can probably pack it up. Or a Fury, something like that. But whilst their creature in play is worse in combat than our Hexmage, then I think we're in a spot where we can win this game. Alright, so that was one of the cards I didn't want to see. So this guy has to attack this turn. They both have to attack, then we attack back with our Hexmage. So we are not winning this race, right? So they come in next turn. I put them to 8, then they put me to 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Yeah, so I'm not winning this unless I draw another Hexmage. Like, I can keep this guy back on blocks, but that's not going to win us the game. I guess we keep this guy back on blocks and we can gobble up the Goblin Shaman token. We really need a second Hexmage here. We're not supposed to win this game versus the turn 1 Trinisphere, turn 2 Blood Moon, whatever it was. Or turn 3 Blood Moon. We're not supposed to win that game. So if we can squeeze it by getting really lucky, then I'll take it. But I'm expecting to have to win this one out of the sideboard. We have a pretty good Pithing Needle target in Reflection of Kiki-Jiki here. Fury. Okay, I'm happy to pack it up there. Alright, so, Trinisphere, so. These Force of Vigors are going to be very nice. These Dismembers certainly have text because they're going to be bringing in things like Magus of the Moon, which is not something I want. Pithing Needle is not really going to have that many options for our opponent. Stifle also looking pretty medium, which gives us the option of boarding in something else if we want to. So we could board in another land just to try and play around Trinisphere. We do have quite a lot of mana already. We could board in one Steely Resolve because A, it's a green card that pitches to Force of Vigor, and B, it stops the card Dead Gone from bouncing our 2020. I think we still keep the Knot of this World because it's just 3 ways of protecting our guy, but we shouldn't really need the Steely Resolves that much. Just trying to think if there's anything else Pithing Needle wise. Like, if the game becomes about Reflection of Kiki-Jiki, then it's probably gone wrong for us already. Flusterstorm doesn't have a lot of targets here. I think, like, Stifle can stifle triggers from, like, Fables and Goblin Rabblemaster, but I don't think that's how we're winning this game. I think this is probably the best setup we have. We want to keep the Thoughtseize in because if we're on the play, we can Thoughtseize away the lock piece that is going to stop us from winning. So we'll submit like this. What does this opening hand do? So we have a Thoughtseize that costs us our Lotus Petal, potentially. Or we can crop... I don't really want to have to crop rotate for Urborg to cast this. So we could have these two and the Petal. So we tap 1... we don't get to tap the Dark Depths. This is quite a slow hand. I think we can do better. Interesting. So we can crop rotate for a basic if we need to. This is a turn 3 Marit Lage with Dismember and Not of This World up. That's probably okay. The issue is if they make a super early Blood Moon, that can be a problem. Now we do have a load of Force of Vigor that we can draw. But we can also get a green source so we can Sylvan Scrying if we find one. So I think we keep this and we have to put back one of these cards. I think it's probably the Knot of This World. I don't think that's how they're necessarily going to try and win this game. So there is an option here of playing the Urborg first, but if I need to crop rotate, I need to crop rotate. So I think I have to play this out. And our hand is a turn 3 kill. Now if we draw a Hexmage next turn, then sure, we could have been able to win. But I think having the ability to play around the Blood Moons and stuff with the Gemstone Mine is going to be good for us. Ancient Tomb. What is this going to find? If this is a Chalice of the Void, we crack this for... Okay, yeah. So we will get ourselves... Wait, we don't actually have a basic in our deck, do we? But we need the Thespian stage to win in a few turns. Is that the best option we've got? Yes, okay. We'll get a Thespian stage out now. Sure, this is fine. Not super fine, but we're doing okay. So I think we play out the Urborg here, so we can cast a Dismember if they have a Magus of the Moon. Or if they have a Magus of the Moon, we just play Dark Depths and then cast it. Because Dark Depths will come with no counters because it will just be a mountain, and then we get to Dismember the Magus. Now if they play a Blood Moon this turn, that's going to be real awkward for us. We have some number of draws that do it, like we have Force of Vigors, we have 3 of those. We have Boseiju, and we have the Sylvan Scryings that can find them, but we don't have a lot in the way of green sources right now. So this is why I would sometimes play a 4th Force of Vigor for matchups like this. Although this deck has fallen out of favour quite a lot lately because it's not great against the initiative deck. Because obviously Chalices don't really do much. The Trinispheres aren't great either. They can usually get around Blood Moon because they play a load of basics. And if they put any threat in play while you're playing lock pieces or whatever, then they just soar ahead usually. Is this the Blood Moon? This is a Trinisphere. Okay, that's fine. We have a Dark Depths next turn. 2020 next turn. So we play this one out. And we pass the turn. Sure, there we go. The 2020 beats some of these lock pieces. Excellent. So, back to the sideboard. Do we want any changes? I don't think we require any. Our Thoughtseize obviously get slightly worse because they can maybe land a turn 1 Trinity or something, but I think this is just fine to submit as is. Our hand is a pretty easy mulligan. Doesn't have any of our pieces. It does have 3 green mana on it, but I don't think this is a sensible keep. So what does this hand do? This hand requires 1 piece to go off. Now, if that piece is the Dark Depths, it's going to the Hexmage, it's going to take a little bit longer. We have a Dismember for a potential Magus of the Moon. We have a green source to go and get green mana if required. I think this one is slow. Is it too slow to keep? I think it probably is. Okay. This one's fine. So we get rid of the Not of This World. And we have to get rid of one on the card. I guess it's probably going to be one of our Gemstone Mines. Because you want to be able to Thoughtseize on turn 1 if we need to. Now, our opponent's going to play something on turn 1. What is it? A tapped land. Okay. That's fine by me. So, get this out. We will Thoughtseize our opponent, see what they're working with. We've got Caves of Chaos Adventurer, which they can't cast for a bunch of turns. A Dead and Gone, which could be a problem. Or this Favor of the Mirror Breaker that's going to fix their hand in a couple of turns. Interesting. Interesting. Our hand is kind of slow. Do we want to get rid of this Dead Gone just to make sure that we can get through? I think we do. I think we just need to get rid of the piece because we don't have a protection spell in our hand. We'll play this out in case somehow they manage to deploy like they can draw a Chalice and drop it for 0 or something. Unlikely, but possible. What land are they playing? Den of the Bugbear, probably? There it is. They draw a spell that does stuff. A Chalice. Sure. Okay, so our crop rotations and Thoughtseize are off, but that's not the end of the world. Okay, so we will Sylvan Scrying. This will get us a Dark Depths and then next turn we have a 20/20. Our Gemstone Mine only produces 1 more mana before it goes away. A Legion Warboss. This is the wrong card for them to play, in my opinion, because they've just seen that we have the kill on board. So, because they've seen the Dark Depths in our hand. Okay, so we'll play this one out and pass the turn. Because if they play the Favor of the Mirror Breaker, last turn they'd have a chance to cycle into a Dead Gone. Okay, casting a spell here, not great for them. Sure, come at me. I don't mind. Now, I could make a Dark Depths here to mess with them in combat, but I think I would rather have the ability to make it end of turn to dodge some potential hate. So I'm not going to have any permanents apart from a 20/20 in play this turn. Did they draw a second Dead Gone? They have 1 card in their hand. 1 mystery card. Okay, they did not have it. So we chose the correct card with our Thoughtseize, and we won the game. Our opponent, yeah. Game 1, obviously, Blood Moons when you're not expecting them, pretty hard to beat. But after that, when you know what you're playing against, you can keep your opening hand to reflect that a little bit more. And I think our opponent should have mulliganed deeper for the third game, personally. Because, like, this card isn't doing anything at all. Their hand was really slow. It was basically just mana into 3 and 4 drops, but it wasn't fast mana. I think they should have mulliganed to find something else. Now, if the Chalice was in their opening hand, then maybe you keep that because you can slow down a crop rotation. But I think, yeah. All right, we're on the board with a win in the first round. Let's go into the second round. We're on the play for round 2, which is a pretty good place to be. Our hand is one that looks close, but it's actually quite far away. We don't have any green mana for our Sylvan Scrying, even though we've got... If this was an Urborg, then obviously we'd be alright, but I don't think we can keep this. So what does this hand do for us? This is a turn 3 20/20 with a little bit of protection, perhaps. That's quite slow. So what can we do here? We can go turn 1, Confluence, turn 2, Gemstone Mine, Sylvan Scrying, turn 3, Dark Depths, Hexmage, turn 4 kill. Is a turn 4... I think turn 4 kill is probably slightly too slow. Now, we do get to draw some more cards, but I think we can do better. Okay, this is an annoying one again, because we don't have black mana. But I think we can keep this. Probably better than going to 4. So we're probably looking at getting rid of the Sejiri Steppe and a Ghost Quarter. This way, if we draw any black source, we can Thoughtseize. Right, let's play out this Yavimaya and pass. This will represent a crop rotation to our opponent, so they might be less inclined to Wasteland. A good player shouldn't be Wastelanding this Yavimaya. Just left open like this, in my opinion at least. Okay, once upon a time, so we could be looking at Elves here. A Lion's Eye Diamond. Arc Anjay's Ravager. Okay, so we're looking at Madness here. It's normally a pretty good matchup because they can't really interact with what you're doing. Now, if they just make a really strong turn 1 play, we're going to struggle a little bit to get into this game. We're only attacking on turn 4. So this is the same speed as the other hand I am a nerd over. Obviously, we're on less cards. Now, if we draw a crop rotation, we can kill them. We can make a 20/20 next turn. But they're going to have a lot of power in play. And they got an Anger here as well. So this is basically the God hand, I would say, for Madness. They're going to get 2 Anjay's Ravager. They're going to get an Anjay Ravager in play and attacking on turn 1 with a bunch of other little lads. So this is going to be a pretty strong turn. Oh, they don't have a mountain, actually. So they're not actually going to be attacking. So not quite. If one of these Lion's Eye Diamond was a mountain, then it would have been a pretty good hand for them. Okay, a Lotus Petal. Does that change anything here? This means you make a turn 3 20/20. We can't do anything else about this. So I think we play out the stage here, and then next turn we play out the depths, and then we can use our stuff. So we should be able to clock our opponent. I'm going to play out this. Is it better to have this in hand or in play? I think it's better to have it in play. So next turn we make a 20-20. So this turn we're going to be taking 3, 4, 5, 6, possibly 10. But then we get to make a 20-20 to block with on our next turn. Okay, Lion's Eye Diamond is a very poor draw from our opponents. Well, not necessarily, because they're about to draw some more cards. It could end up being good. But they ideally wanted something to put in with the Ravager this turn. They can put stuff in because of the Lion's Eye Diamond if they want to crack it to pump their like Root Waller and stuff. They're just going to hit us for the damage. Okay. Okay, so this gets them the Mountain. So next turn, their things will have haste. So they have to hit us for 14 next turn through a 20-20 blocker. Which hopefully they can't do. But it's certainly possible with the way that this deck operates sometimes. Let's play our Dark Depths and say go. We could have Thoughtseized them this turn, but I don't really want to Thoughtseize my Dark Depths, my Madness opponent, to be honest. They shouldn't have any main deck interaction for what we're doing here. A Street Wraith, sure. Their life total doesn't really matter as long as it's below 20. Any number is basically the same for them. Once Upon a Time, sure. Let's see what they reveal. A Blazing Root Waller. So this can come in with haste if they want it. Okay. So coming in with all of these guys. This is 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. So unless they've got the thing that shoots us for 3, a Fiery Temper, then we're okay. So we may as well make our 20-20 because I don't think our opponent is going to have a way of dealing with it. Dark Depths. Make a 20-20. Go to blocks. And gobble up the 3-3. This is just the best way of insulating our life total in case they've got like some Fiery Tempers or something in hand. Sure, so then we win. Like I said about this matchup, they come out pretty fast, but if we get there, we get there. Just going to have a quick check to see what Madness is playing in the sideboard these days. So my brief check on the internet tells me that the Madness decks are currently not playing any Blood Moons. So that's good to know. On the current list, I can't see anything in their decks that actually interacts with us. So that's pretty good. So we've got these Dismembers. We can probably run some Dismembers. I don't think we're going to need these Pithing Needles necessarily. We may as well have a little bit of removal for their creatures. Other than that, I think we're fine. We can stifle Madness triggers, which is pretty funny. And I've not seen any removal in any of the lists I looked at from the past couple of months quickly. So I think we just roll like this. The other option is like something like Flusterstorm in case they got something weird, but I don't think that's a safe bet. I think we should just pretty much run it back. And this is a good matchup as long as they don't super wombo us super hard. So the Madness deck can kill as early as turn 2. This is a turn 2 20-20. So we go Gemstone Mine, crop rotate into Urborg, play the Dark Depths, play Hexmage. That all seems above board. And that also gives us a free Stifle if we need it. So I am down for this one. Our opponent might have something like a Thoughtseize, but the sideboards I looked at were mainly red cards. So they were sort of trying to go... I saw some with Unchained Berserker, I saw Leylines. Okay, a hollow one. This represents a potentially quick clock if they can get it with haste with things like Anger, because they already have a Mountain in play. Just thinking of how we can lose this game with this hand. It's certainly possible. The Bojuka Bog wanted to stay in our deck because our opponent has Vengevines, and there might be a situation where we need to do that. Okay, Faith is Looting. This is not as good as a Lion's Eye Diamond, but it can find the Lion's Eye Diamond and set some things up. It does mean that Hollow One is quite likely to be cast this turn. It's only going to cost 1 mana. No, it's only going to cost 0 mana because of the Street Wraith, actually. Yeah, so this costs 3. Yeah. So there is the Hollow One. There is a Lion's Eye Diamond. So this could get pretty dicey for us if they crack this and have an Anger in hand. Anjo's Ravager. Sure. No Anger, though, so we are okay, I would say. They only get to play one of these, right? Yeah, sure. So it's our turn. Our opponent doesn't really have any resources into play. There, we just play our Gemstone Mine here, and then we pass the turn. Mindbreak Trap is something we potentially have to play around, but we should be able to avoid that because the Stifle is like the third spell we might want to cast. Okay, so our opponent's going to attack. They've got no cards they're discarding. Do we have an option of stifling this trigger right now, which I think is fine. Stop our opponent getting into their deck. Okay, they're cracking this. They have no cards in hand, so they're just doing it to thin, I guess. We have lots of Urborgs, so we need to worry about drawing it. So we go, just trying to think if there's any way we can generate even more mana. We don't really need to, do we? Let's just crop rotate this away for an Urborg. Play a Dark Depths. Play a Vampire Hexmage. So I've not seen any madness list with any land destruction. So I'm going to hold this back rather than cracking it in their upkeep to dodge something like a Wasteland. So these guys are both coming in. We can prevent the damage and make a 20/20, or we can just make a 20/20. There could be a dead gone in their hand. That's a realistic thing that we might have to play around. But that's an instant. So we... Okay. They just looked at some cards, saw they had nothing for us and died. So the only way we really lose to madness, as a general rule, is if you keep bad hands, which is your fault. Generally, you can get super unlucky, but if they have the turn, if they have like turn 1 anger, so they get to bash you on turn 1, they can sometimes clock you as early as turn 2, which can come under some of your Dark Depths kills. Now you can keep a slow hand that's sort of going on turn 3, but over the course of 3 matches, you should be winning this matchup because they're an aggro deck and your combo just kind of ignores what they're doing and sometimes just actually takes out their creature in combat and then also goes through to kill them. They don't really have any interaction. Now, that's not to say that Madness decks can't run interaction. They can run Dead Gone and bits and pieces like that, but the configurations don't really have the space for that in terms of what they're trying to beat normally, so we kind of just get a freebie against them. So a 2-0, let's crack on to round 3. We're on the play for round 3, which is a nice spot to be. What does our hand do? Our hand makes a turn 4 Marit Lage. This is no good. We have to mulligan this one. What does this hand do? This hand makes a turn 3 Marit Lage with double protection. That's probably good enough, I think. We can keep this. I'm just thinking if we want to keep 2 pieces of protection or not. I guess we can probably throw back the Mana Confluence. Now, the only issue here is if we get stung by a Wasteland, we might want this Mana Confluence. So maybe we keep the Mana Confluence and bin off the Spirit Guide and keep the double protection. Because if we're against something like Initiative or whatever, then the double protection is going to be very, very good and be the difference between winning and losing. Whereas a Wasteland is just going to be good against us at the end of the day. So we'll play out our Urborg first, because this gives us access to a turn 2 Marit Lage if we draw Vampire Hexmage. A basic swamp from our opponent. Interesting. So we are Thoughtseize proof with our hand right now, so that's fine. You can take one of our Not of This World. Can you race a turn 3 20/20? Now, they might be able to, but if they're a mono black deck, they might be looking for Doughty Voidwalker and Helm of Obedience, which they can certainly cast and kill us with before then. I took one of the only available options. Back to us. A Gemstone Mine that we're not going to play. Let's play this Thespian stage. We want to play the Dark Depths out last because that's the thing that we only have 4 of in our deck. Whereas we have things that go with... We have lots of things that go with Dark Depths. Did our opponent keep a 1-lander? Interesting if true. So we have a Dark Depths here. In our opponent's upkeep, we're going to make a Dark Depths in case they have Wastelands in their deck. We have 2 Not of This World, so we are very covered. Now, there's always random stuff that you forget that, well, not that you forget about, that you haven't seen for a long time that can come and bite you. But we've played around them dropping a blue source and stifling us. We've played around Wasteland. We can play around 2 pieces of removal. We can't play around Sudden Edict. Okay, so we got the concession. We don't really know what our opponent's doing other than that he started on a swamp. All right. What does that mean for how we sideboard is the question. That is a question, isn't it? So... effects that make us sacrifice a guy are just going to be good against us, and there's not a lot we can do about this. Now, our opponent, if they're mono black, might have Opposition Agent. We've seen Hand Disruption, so we can board in Flusterstorms for that. But the problem with doing that is the cards that we really don't want them to take, generally speaking, are lands. So Thoughtseize isn't amazing against us. The other problem with that is if our opponent, if we're having to keep a card in our hand to deal with a Thoughtseize, that doesn't help. And Flusterstorm doesn't hit non-instant or sorcery things, so we can't hit something like a Helm of Obedience, for example. Now, black removal is not going to be very good against Marit Lage, things like Snuff Outs and stuff like that, so I don't think we need Steely Resolve. The only removal that's going to hit us is the sack effect, and we can't really do anything about that. Dismembers for Opposition Agent is something I am interested in here. Now, if we board these in, we're going to have to cut down on something. So our Pithing Needles can definitely help versus some of the things that they could potentially be bringing to the table. Things like Helm of Obedience, for example. But again, I don't really know what they are. They could be a Reanimator deck for all I know. But would a Reanimator deck keep for a hand like that? Interesting. We don't really have a lot of information about what our opponent's doing. I'm kind of tempted to board in these Leylines just in case. But how would we go about fitting them in? Well, we could trim down on some bits and pieces to have a couple of Leylines maybe. Or is this silly talk? Then we just trim down like this to get the dismembers in for opposition agents. And then we'll see what happens. Our opponent's kind of got a bit of an advantage this game because they get to sideboard properly and we don't really. We just boarded in a couple of things that might end up being dead at the end of the day. So Reanimator is an interesting matchup. We do have like some cards for it. But I can't imagine our opponent's has Reanimate because the Reanimator deck has so many cheap spells that they would have cast something. I have to imagine they're more on the mono black spectrum. They could also just be like a bug deck or something that happened to have a swamp. But why would you keep that hand? I don't know. What does this hand do? This hand doesn't really... It doesn't make a 20/20. Not for a long time because we have to just keep pumping mana into this. So we have to mulligan. What does this hand do? Not a lot. Let's mulligan. What does this hand do? This hand makes a 20/20. On turn 3. That's fine. So we can keep this. We've got to get rid of 2 of these cards. So we need the Urborg. So we can go Urborg, Dark Depths. We need the Spirit Guide so we can cast a Sylvan Scrying without messing up our Urborg curve. So we need these 4 cards, which means we're losing 2 of these. We can cast the Thoughtseize on turn 1, so it means we're probably putting these 2 back. That makes sense to me. Our opponent did not begin with a Leyline in the Void in play. A Scrubland. Okay. Our opponent could be like Dead Guy Ale, perhaps. Could be a Scam deck. Unmask. Targeting themselves. Looks like they are a Reanimator deck. Okay, so they're getting a turn 1 Grizzlebrand. So I should have boarded those Leylines. How likely is it that we beat turn 1 Grizzlebrand with Animate Dead? I don't think we're going to beat that. I don't think it's worth playing that. Okay, so Dismembers, get out of here. Not of this world, not very useful here. Sylvan Scrying. So these Flusterstorms are actually good here. So that's nice. And what we're looking at cutting here. I don't think we need Pithing Needles at all here, which means we can bring back the Sylvan Scrying to make ourselves slightly more reliable. And we've got one more slot that we can bring in. Do we need any of these things? Not particularly. I guess we can keep one... We can have one Force of Vigor in case they have an Animate Dead that we can blow up, or a Serenity. Something like that. I think that's probably better than these. Or we could have a Pithing Needle for Grizzlebrand, but in that situation we've probably already lost. Although a 20/20 is pretty useful still in that sort of situation, so maybe that's okay. Stifle, what are we hitting with Stifle? We're hitting the trigger from the Archon of Cruelty, which we have to stop from hitting us because that's going to be a real problem. Thoughtseize still good. All these other things still good. Yep, I think this is fine. Yes, I would like to play first. Is there a Leyline in my opening hand? There is not a Leyline in my opening hand. There is a Thoughtseize, Flusterstorm, turn 2 20/20. Like, on the play, this has got to be good enough, right? We get to Thoughtseize, Flusterstorm, and then make a turn 2 20/20. That feels like it's going to be hard for our opponent to beat. Now, if they have a Chancellor, we only get to do either Flusterstorm or Thoughtseize, so we probably roll with a Thoughtseize, I think, and use a Lotus Petal to pay for the ability on the Chancellor. Now, I haven't seen a lot of Chancellor from Reanimated decks for a while, but you never know. Okay, no Chancellor. Excellent. What are you working with your 6-card hand? Dark Ritual, Faith is Looting, Show and Tell. Dark Ritual, Faith is Looting, Show and Tell. Which of these is actually scariest to me? That's an interesting question. I think it might be the Dark Ritual that's kind of the slightly scary one there. Or do we want the Show and Tell? Interesting. We can take the Faith is Looting and kind of strand them a little bit because we're hoping to win the game quite soon. Yeah, I think we'll do that. And we'll play out our Lotus Petal. Go ahead, opponent. So this turn they might not have a play at all. That's what we're trying to do. So we can save our Flusterstorm for when we need it. So there's a Bloodstone Mire. Put this Dark Depths. Put this Hexmage. Black. Black. You're going to need something good. We don't even know about its Flusterstorm yet. Play this out. Just in case it becomes relevant for some reason. And then we'll pass the turn. Our opponent can cast a Show and Tell this turn. But if they do that, they have to go Dark Ritual into Show and Tell. And we have a Flusterstorm for that. Now, the one thing that can get us potentially is if they cast a Dark Ritual. Ideally, I'd like my opponent to cast an Entomb now. That would be the best. Okay, they didn't cast Entomb. So if they cast a Dark Ritual, then they have like some sort of free discard spell. That can be a problem for us. There's a Pluto Delta. So this is the Dark Ritual. So if we counterspell this, they don't put a creature into play this turn. So I think we just counterspell this, right? They have to pay 2 or it's countered. Good old Spell Pierce doing enough here. Because if they have a Thoughtseize, they Thoughtseize the Flusterstorm and then cast a Show and Tell. This way they don't get that option. People don't counterspell Dark Rituals enough, in my opinion. So they got one mystery card in hand. Oh, sorry, two mystery cards actually, because they just cast the Dark Ritual. Has our opponent entered the Pit of Despair? They're tanking for a while. There we go. Got the match. Nice. A very quick 3-0 so far. I like the way we played that one. We, turn 2, making a 2020 with 2 pieces of interaction. What more could you ask for? I'm not sure what happened in game 1. I think we got lucky game 1 because our opponent didn't do anything. So that was pretty wild to me what happened in game 1. But I'll take it. A win's a win, right? So let's go on to round 4. So this hand is no good. If we had an Elvish Spirit Guide, I would be happy with this one, but we don't. So let's mulligan. We're on the draw for this one, by the way. So what does this hand do? Interesting. We get to... This makes a turn 3 2020 through a Pithing Needle. Through a, with Pithing Needle for Wasteland. It's not the fastest, but it's relatively protected in some respects. We'll get rid of the bonus Pithing Needle. We'll get rid of the bonus Pithing Needle with the less good art. Okay. Our opponent's name is Grindstone Cowboy, so they might well be on Painter. This certainly looks like a Painter hand. Okay. Yeah. Our opponent looks like they are on Painter's Servant, and their name is Grindstone Cowboy, so I'm going to name Grindstone. We beat past the speed of the Urza Saga, so we're just going to name Grindstone so we didn't get one boat out here. Right, so it's our opponent's turn now, and they're probably going to play a Soul Land, like an Ancient Tomb, and start cranking out tokens. That's not going to be good enough to beat us with this particular hand. Now, what we do have to worry about is the Urza Saga fetching Pithing Needle of their own. A Mox Opal, sure. An Ensnaring Bridge. Okay, so this game has taken a bit of a turn. So we're going to have to get through multiple layers of stuff here. Thoughtseize. So this Thoughtseize is not really helping us out here. So what are we doing here? We get one shot at... So they're going to name Thespian Stage with their Pithing Needle, I would imagine. So we're going to be looking for... we're going to be looking for Boseiju with this, I think. Now they can go and cast... they can get this and put the Pithing Needle on Boseiju if we go and get it now. So I think we wait a turn because this game is gonna take a few turns. This is not going to be a super quick one. Oh, blue mana. That might just be them tapping it because that's what they wanted to tap. But it could be the blue painter deck, which does change the texture of the matchup slightly. I guess we'll find out in a second. So they're going to go and get a Pithing Needle here and name Thespian Stage. No, they got Grindstone. Interesting. Okay. Okay, so a Wooded Foothills, this means that they're playing the... Okay, they're playing Strawberry Shortcake then, which is a version of Painter that is quicker than other builds. Khan the Great Creator. I don't particularly care about that one. 1, 2, 3, 4. Now, there is a world where we get Mycosynth last, which is not a world that I want to live in, but it's a world that we might find ourselves in. Pithing Needle. Sure, so they're getting the Pithing Needle here. This will name Thespian Stage. Wasteland. Oh, they think we're lands. Interesting. Okay. So that's a free roll for us there. We were going to name that on turn 1, but... Okay. So, we have the ability to make a 2020 pretty soon. But we will need... We can make a 2020 this turn. I'm just trying to work out if it's worth making a 2020 this turn or not. Because what we can do is we can tap both of these for green. And use this to turn this into a... Thespian Stage and copy it, so we can make a 2020. And then we have one land in play for next turn. So it's going to be very hard for us to Boseiju. So I think we Sylvan Scrying this turn for Boseiju. And this goes right into our hand. And this will cost 1 less with a Marit Lage in the battlefield. So when we do this, our Yavimaya can untap and cast us a Boseiju. We do have some protection. The Elvish Spirit Guide is something that you can actually... cast from your... that you can do under a Karn lock with Mycosynth Lattice. So if we make a 2020 and they try and make a Lattice lock, we get to Boseiju it away. Like try and Lattice lock away our lands. So we're in an interesting spot here. Now if they have removal, they can get rid of this Pithing Needle. Because they can turn it into a creature and then plow it or whatever. Green mana. Phyrexian Dragon Engine, sure. That's not particularly scary. Let's see what this Karn does. That's going to be the interesting one. Okay. They plussed it with no targets. Alrighty then. So if we draw a land this turn, that would be pretty good for us, actually. Sylvan Scrying, that's not a land. It costs us 2 mana to make it. I think we're on make the Marit Lage, untap, Boseiju there, and Snowbridge. Because that's the line that beats the Mycosynth Lattice lock. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So if they have a land this turn and go for the Lattice lock, we have the game. We can kill this Phyrexian Dragon Engine if we want to by making a 20/20, but I don't want to do that, to be honest. Go on. Go for the Lattice lock. Here we go. Ensnaring Bridge. Another Ensnaring Bridge. Can we beat 2 Ensnaring Bridges? Genuine question. Let me check my list. The only way we beat double Ensnaring Bridge is via Hexmage beats. Is that worth playing on? I don't think so. Let's save our time and go to sideboarding. Alright, so our opponent is like a mono-red painter deck with Karn, which you don't actually see that often. Karn's sort of fallen by the wayside. This is the matchup where we're going to need Dismembers because our opponent quite often brings in Magus of the Moon. So let's get these Force of Vigors and this Dismember. Flusterstorm doesn't hit the things we really want to hit. It's a shame. Stifle has some pretty good text here. So does Pithing Needle. The Knot of this Worlds are probably the weak link here. And then we just need to make one cut. So we probably cut the... Bojuka Bog has text here. Karakas. What is Karakas doing here? Not a lot. I think we can get rid of a Karakas. And submit. We have double Force of Vigor, which is kind of nice. But we don't really go anywhere with this hand. So I think we can do better. This is a turn 2 2020. So I think we can keep this. We're probably looking at putting back the... It's either the Stifle or the bonus Hexmage. I think it's the bonus Hexmage. We can play the Hexmage around removal. Sure, let's do that. So what we're going to do is we float black, use the Spirit Guide to crop rotate one of them away into Dark Depths, and then we play our Hexmage and kill it. And make a 20/20. That's our strategy. There's certainly ways this can go wrong for us. Our opponent tries to race to a Karn, we can stifle the Karn activation. A Lotus Petal. So this could be a Magus of the Moon on turn 1. A Painter's Servant. Sure. This is an as trigger, so it doesn't matter. We can't do anything about it. A Lotus Petal would be a really good draw for us here. Oh my god, we drew it. This means we get to keep Stifle up this turn as well. So this is what I would describe as it all coming up Millhouse. Now, the one downside here is that our opponent can Pyroblast what we do here. Can we realistically beat the Pyroblast our opponent is representing? I don't know if we can. Then we go black, crop rotate away our Gemstone Mine. This gives them a Pyroblast target. That's pretty juicy. Okay, so now we get Dark Depths. Then we cast our Vampire Hexmage. Then we pass a turn. Our opponent can Pyroblast this. Our Dark Depths or our Hexmage. Obviously the Hexmage is a pretty bad one to Pyroblast. But they can Pyroblast the Dark Depths. So we need to be able to stop that from happening. Ideally, we want our opponent to go for a kill this turn. So if they go, okay, so they're casting a Lightning Bolt on this. So they'll do this, they'll sacrifice this and Pyroblast it. You wouldn't make that play unless you had the Pyroblast. Here we go. There's the Pyroblast. Pretty awkward for us. We're going to have to rebuild here. It was only a 2 for 2 exchange, but obviously we don't really have a lot left in play right now. We're going to need to find both halves of our combo. Certainly possible. We're not going to get killed by Grindstone in the immediate future, at least. An Urza's Saga. Sure. So we can stifle the trigger at the end of this. A Grindstone. Okay. They should still be attacking here, to be honest. So they're going to try and Grindstone us in our upkeep. I say no to your Grindstone activation. We've drawn land. That's something. We do have another Stifle. But we need to find a way of blowing this up or a Pithing Needle in the near future. They're going to attack this time? Yeah, okay. They've missed 1 point of damage so far. I think we are just going to lose this one, though. The turn 1 Painter's Servant plus Lotus Petal plus Pyroblast is a pretty low percentage hand, so I can't feel too bad about losing to that. Ugh, God. Why? Why am I 1 mana short? Our opponent's just going to keep activating the Grindstone. I could even get a second Grindstone here. It's only a possibility. Okay, they're making a Saga Construct. I don't know how many times I'm going to be able to stifle or mess with their Grindstone activation. Which is fair. They may as well try and get us on both axes here. So what our plan was, if our opponent didn't have the Lightning Bolt and just had the Painted Servant and the Pyroblast, they'd hold up forever, is eventually we can draw a Thespian stage. So we can activate the Hexmage. And when they go to blast it, we Thespian stage it. That's the way you get around one. But they had 2 pieces of interaction as well as the turn 1 Painter Blast. So I don't feel so bad about that. They got Pithing Needle on Hexmage as well now. Things are going to get a little bit tricky. But they're probably going to grind us in our upkeep. Coward. Do it in our end step. Give us a chance. Yeah, so we had a Force of Vigor in hand as well. We just hit We just hit some pretty low percentages, really. I think game one, I think we got a lucky game two. I think game one, our opponent beat us fair and obviously beat us fair and square both games. I think game one was just a case of them slowly, oppressively grinding us down. And the fact that they had, they built their deck in such a way that they could get multiple ensnaring bridges. Like maybe they were lucky to get their main deck ensnaring bridge, but I don't know how many they run. They could have 3 in the main deck as far as I know, which is certainly possible. So it's not out of the question. So I think, yeah, it's a little bit awkward. This matchup is normally all right because your opponent doesn't get to interact with your 2020. They have to interact with the stuff that comes before. So if you like make a turn 1 or a turn 2, you can quite often do it. Now sometimes they will just have the Paint a Blast on turn 1 and then follow up interaction the following turn off of another coloured source, and there's not much you can do about that. So I can't feel bad about that. If you know my channel, you know I love a bit of Painted Servant, so getting beaten by one of the good guys probably. So especially since their name is Grindstone Cowboy, they've no doubt been a painter player for some time. So respect them and GG's opponent. On to the final round to see if we can get the 4-1. We're on the play for the final round, which is an alright place to be. What does our hand do? Our hand requires we either need a crop rotation, so that's 4 cards. Sylvan Scrying, that's another 4 cards. A Hexmage, that's another 4 cards, that's 12 cards. Or a Thespian stage, so that's 16 cards. That's 16 cards that we can draw that win us the game turn 3-ish with protection from Wasteland. Is that good enough? Can we do better? Should we do better? We get to Thoughtseize our opponent turn 1 as well. I think we can keep this one. If we see Wastelands in our opponent's hands, we might have to burn our Spirit Guide for a Wasteland. What's our opponent got here? Grief, Snuff Out, Baleful Strix, Daze. So we're going to get discarded next turn. Interesting. Now we're going to have to play around some Dazes. Also kind of interesting, but not that scary. Snuff Out doesn't do anything against us. Would we rather have them grief us, or would we rather have them Thoughtseize us? Thoughtseize helps their life total in terms of them casting a what's it called? Death Shadow. Baleful Strix does block our thing and slows our clock down by a turn. So what we're going to do is we're going to play Pithing Needle, naming Flooded Strand, I think. That feels like a mean thing to do and really shut this hand down. So if we take the grief, and then we're going to try and cheese our opponent. Now, if they top deck a Wasteland, we're going to get some real Schadenfreude there, and that's on me. But I'm just going to draw a Hexmage next turn. It's going to be great. There's the Flooded Strand. They do get to cast a black spell off of it, though. But they just not access to blue mana. Sure, you can take our Not of This World or this Stifle. That's not going to win us the game. If I keep my opponent off blue mana, they don't get to cast a Baleful Strix. They don't get to cast any Ponders or Brainstorms. They don't get to cast a Daze. Which one of these would you like to take? Neither of them really help you. I guess one of them I can cast potentially, and the other one I need a mana source for. But I need something else for my hand to make either of these do something. I'm taking the Stifle. That's fair. Considering I've shut down their access to blue, I can see why they would do that. Another Urborg. Not the one. Not the one. We play the Dark Depths out now in case we draw a Thespian stage next turn. This does expose us to a Wasteland. If we get cheesed out, well, it's not really cheesed out. If we get Wastelanded out because we try to cheese out our opponent, that's our fault. But I think looking at this hand, that was the best way to stop our opponent playing Magic. A Gemstone Mine. Sure. So we're going to start activating our Dark Depths the old-fashioned way. Because we have the mana, we may as well do it. Now, our opponent can just draw a land and start doing things. But they have to draw a land. They can draw another Flooded Strand. A Thoughtseize on us again. Sure, you can take the Not of This World. So we know that's what our opponent drew for turn. Let's have a look. A Thoughtseize. This is a pretty useful one. I think we will cast this Thoughtseize on our opponent. So what are we looking at here? The Snuff Outs don't do very much. The Brainstorm can certainly get them back in if they find a blue source. It's a case of, would I rather they cast a Brainstorm, or would I rather they cast a Baleful Strix if they find a blue source? I think I would rather them cast a Baleful Strix. We could play out this second Urborg, but we can use that mana for something later on anyway if we need to. I don't think we're realistically going to be removing all the counters from this. Not the old-fashioned way anyway. I'm going to Thoughtseize this other card away. The life loss for them isn't a big deal because, okay, they got to reanimate, sure. So now they have a clock. Our Urborg has come back to bite us a little bit. Again, we don't need a lot to be able to win this game. So we have a way of making our guy sail through the Baleful Strix later. But we will need to draw one of our things. Sylvan Scrying or a crop rotation. Okay, so now they've got blue sources. So now we're looking like we're going to get punished soon. They can cast Dazes now. Now we can play around Daze relatively fine if I can even cast one of them. A Baleful Strix, sure. So we're going to take a little hit to the face here. And then remove some counters. Now, we're definitely not going to get this done in time, but we might as well. Come on, one of the many spells in our deck. Yikes. This Bojuka Bog would have been good earlier. We're still going to play it now because it will shut down potential Murktides in our opponent's future. We really need to draw one of these many spells that just gives us the game here. And we can play around Dazes. A Brainstorm. Okay, so our opponent's fully out of our cheesing them now. So, less than ideal. I don't think there's any point removing these counters because we're going to die way before then anyway. So we may as well just save our time and just pass through the turn. Come on, good cards. Yikes. Like, our creature's not going anywhere once we can play it. But we do need to find one of our many hits. We've bricked for an awful lot of turns. Maybe this shouldn't have been a keep. I don't know. Seems fine. Sure. These Baleful Strix don't matter to me because we're going to stealth through them anyway because we're going to give our guy pro blue or pro black. Doesn't really matter which way. So this comes in for 4, and this puts us to 5, and the next turn they have a lethal clock. So we need to draw this turn, one of our ways of making a 20/20. Boseiju. Wowzers trousers. Now, they might not attack with all of their guys for fear of our 20/20 coming into play, so they might only jab us for 4 this turn. So we might get another draw step. Now, I'm not sure we get to beat the Grief, because it's got Menace, but we'll see. I think we deserve to lose this game for trying to cheese our opponent out. Okay, we're just coming in for lethal damage. We can just concede that one and go to the sideboard. So the main thing we're worried about here is Brazen Borrower. So Flusterstorm is reasonable here. The Steely Resolves are something that our opponent is really going to struggle to remove. But we kind of want to be able to protect our guy with a Sejiri Steppe. So Steely Resolve's not actually the best here. The Pithing Needles on Wasteland is definitely something I want for this matchup. It's a case of whether or not we board in these Flusterstorms, and if so, how do we fit them in? Are Flusterstorms better than just having more of our stuff? I'm not sure they are, to be honest. We can board in like Leylines and stuff, but I don't think that's worth doing. The Karakas is probably the weakest thing there. Maybe a Tower of the Magistrate that pushes us through Baleful Strixes. Dress Down is another thing that can potentially hit us, but that's all we have Not This World for in these things. So I think we're pretty much pre-boarded for this matchup, really. So what does this hand do? We have turn 1, Gemstone Mine, into turn 2. This is too slow. Let me do better. This is a slow one that leads us to Wasteland. Not really liking this one either, to be honest with you. Then we go into 5. We keep 5 of these cards. So we're definitely keeping the Dark Depths Hexmage because that makes us a 20/20. We need the crop rotation because that gets us our thing. We want a mana source, so Yavimaya probably does that. So then we've got to get rid of 2 other things. We could keep the Confluence instead of the Yavimaya, but the Yavimaya is better in case we get discarded and we need to find a Thespian stage. I think we've been off these 2 lands. The reason we're going to keep the Spirit Guide is to pay a round of days. So we play out the Yavimaya, and then we can crop rotate if they try and wasteland it and pay a round of days. Now, if they've got a Force of Will, they've got a Force of Will, right? But if they're if they're wastelanding this anyway, then such is life. They Thoughtseize us. Okay, they're going to grief us here. What do they exile? Another grief. So this is going to take our Hexmage probably. So I think we just have to let this hit us. Because we can go and get an Urborg now, but what does that do for us? That sets us off a green mana permanently, and we're not going to be able to cast a Hexmage. Yeah. Now they're going to reanimate this and take another thing, and then we're probably going to lose the game. Okay, so now we have a choice. We can keep a green source so that we get to cast all of our green spells, or we can keep the Yavimaya. Like, they're going to hit our crop rotation here, but if we use it now, then they're going to hit our Elvish Spirit Guide. So I think we have to let this go. We've already cast one of our Hex Mages. If we draw a Hex Mage next turn, that's all we get punished. Alright, so there's the crop rotation gone as expected. Now it's over to us. A Thespian stage. That's certainly one of the ones I wanted. So play this one out. So we'll slow roll it as a surprise. We'll just play the cards that they know about. A Ponder. Sure. So they're digging for Wasteland. They need to have it this turn. Now, they probably aren't running Stifle. I don't think there's room in the Death Shadow decks these days. Okay, a Watery Grave. That's good for us. A Thoughtseize doesn't hurt us. Weird they're not paying the life there. Their life total is irrelevant in this matchup. I would always pay the life there. I guess you didn't see a lot of depth. Maybe they're not used to playing against it. Or they've got some really expensive lines they want to try. Okay, so now we have a Thespian stage. In our opponent's upkeep, we make it to dodge Wasteland. They have a lot more Wastelands than they have Brazen Borrowers. They have potentially 2 Brazen Borrowers. They could have a Submerge. That seems very unlikely. I haven't seen it in Shadow before. Not for a long time anyway. Duress. Sure. You can take our Sylvan Scrying. Land Borrower. Sudden Edict. Sure. That's one of the answers. So our opponent had an answer for Marit Lage and triple discard spells. Bit awkward for us. It's going to be tough to win this one now. Okay, we just need a Dark Depths. A crop rotation doesn't do it though. Because if you crop rotate into the Yavimaya or something, that works. But you can't do it the other way around. Because the land that you're tapping won't be, the Dark Depths that you're tapping won't be able to tap for mana, sorry. Right, little punch from the Grief. A few turns of this killing us. A Sylvan Scrying. I wonder if this is going to resolve. If it days it, we pay. If they Force of Will it, then they Force of Will it. A Wasteland beats us anyway, so I think we play it out. This way, if they do Wasteland us, we have a chance of drawing the other half of the combo next turn. How many times can we get through with our 2020? Our opponent's got 2 cards in hand they're not casting, which is interesting to me. They're not days, because they would have cast another days then. Okay, one of them's a land. They've got 1 card in hand. A Sejiri Steppe. Okay. That's something. Let's make it 2020. See if we can get a third game out of these people. Come on, opponent. Don't have it. Or have a Baleful Strix to block with. That would be good. And we get to Sejiri Steppe our way through. I have a feeling they might have another... They seem to have kept 1 card in their hand for a while. A Thoughtseize. Okay, so they see our Sejiri Steppe, and then they're going to cast their removal spell, aren't they? They have it all. Reanimate Hexmage. Okay. Okay, they were just casting their spells. Sure. So we got that one. We went through the combo a couple of times, and we managed to get there. I would quite like some Veil of Summers for this matchup, but we don't have them. Is there anything we want to do differently? There's no way we can interact with the Sudden Edicts, I'm afraid. Interesting. I think we just resubmit as is. We still haven't seen Wastelands from our opponent, but they've got to have them. Right, let's go again. What does this hand do? We have Thoughtseize. We can crop rotate for the Dark Depths, but we can't cast our Hexmage for a little while. Is that going to be a problem or not? I think we keep this one because it's got a lot of cards so we can work through our opponent's resource. On the play, sorry, I would probably ship this. I think on the draw, just having more things to do is probably a good place to be. Now, this could go wrong for us, but we have our combo. We just require a little bit of something to go with it. Thoughtseize? Or they're going to grief us. They're going to grief us, exiling Plague Engineer, which is pretty good on Vampire, I suppose. So this is going to hit us. We'll see what it hits. I guess it probably hits the Hexmage or the crop rotation. If their hand's like crazy good, then they might hit the Thoughtseize. I can't see them hitting Stifle though. Oh, they took the Thoughtseize. This means they probably have a Reanimate. No, interesting. They really did value their hand. Interesting hand that we have now though. So we get to play out our Mana Confluence. Is the Mana Confluence the card that we want? So not really casting black anymore. I guess we are on the turn after. Alright, let's play out this Lotus Petal. This gives us access to Stifle and playing around days and all sorts. So I think we pass the turn here. We have a Stifle now, and we have a crop rotation, an island from our opponent, and no other plays. Interesting. Feels like our opponent wants to try and nab something from us. We'll play out our Yavimaya here. And then we will... Thoughtseize. Our opponent hasn't put a clock on us, so we've got time to see what they're doing and try and work out the puzzle. We don't just have to ram the combo. Okay, so we have Force of Will, Sudden Edict, Surgical Extraction. So Sudden Edict is the one I am most annoyed about here. So we'll get rid of that one. So next turn, we get to make the 2020 here. And we have a Stifle for something if we need it in a pinch. The Stifle will keep us off of the ability to Marit Lage next turn. But we'll see what our opponent has. A Thoughtseize. Thoughtseize is good. Thoughtseize is very good. Interesting. So we can crop rotation in response. I'm going to lose the amount of mana we have. I think that's okay. But they're probably going to take the Hexmage rather than the crop rotation here, I think. Or would they? Would they take the crop rotation or would they take the Hexmage? Let's do this. Okay, so we lose our Hexmage. Sure. We know our opponent's hand. They can certainly extract our Hexmage if they want to, but I don't think that's very good. They're probably looking to wasteland our Dark Depths and then hit that. So... play out a Ghost Quarter. We could play out a Spirit Guide and start beating our opponent down, but that's just going to make their Death Shadows do things. So I think we just pass a turn and We have a lot of redundancy of ways of doing this. Okay, let's have a Wasteland. We have a Stifle in hand. Sure. Interesting play from our opponent there. That was all face-up information. A Mana Confluence. Okay. Do we play out an Elvish Prick? I don't think so. Now, our opponent can play out a Wasteland and Surgical Extract us here. And that's going to be bad for us. Okay, our opponent's drawn a Murktide Regent. Sure. It's not a very large one. It's only a 5/5. Not very large. It's a 2-mana 5/5. It's pretty large. It's still at the same 3 cards in hand they've had for a while. A Pithing Needle. Okay, this is good. We will name Wasteland. So they can't Surgically Extract all of our things away, but we have 4 turns before they kill us. And that gets shrunk every time we tap a Mana Confluence. Our opponent's drawn a cantrip, a Brainstorm. So we're going to get clunked in the face for 5. We're not going to tap our Mana Confluences and burn up any of our resources to try and make this Dark Depths lose counters, because it's not going to work. Opponent's got 1 mystery card in hand. I have to assume they have a Force of Will available to them. A Vampire Hexmage. We have to tap to go below the to reduce the clock here. We don't really have another option available to us here. So we may as well tap them both and try for this. We know they have a Force of Will in hand, but it's a Force of Will we're going to have to get through at some point. Now, they might not have had a blue card. Sure, they did find a blue card. They pitched a Force of Will to it. Okay, sure. So we have to find one of our pieces on our next turn. End of turn Brainstorm from our opponent when they know the top 2 cards of their library already. Interesting. That means they're just trying to pull through them. A Watery Grave. Sure. I'm going to take the damage here. And we need to find an answer. Oh, well, we need to find a way of making our 2020. Surgical Extraction on Crop Rotation. Sure. That removes 3 of our ways of winning the game from our deck. However, we still have 4 Sylvan Scrying, the Thespian stages themselves, 2 more Vampire Hexmages. This suggests to me that our opponent doesn't have a counterspell. We did, however, not draw that. We just drew another Mana Confluence. We lose. So I feel we got very unlucky in that last game. Sometimes you play the numbers, you lose. That's Magic. That's why it's a good game, because there's variance. Otherwise, you're playing chess, which is a good game, but it's a very different game. Also, I think the last game, like you saw the middle game, we against the Death Shadow player, we played through a lot of their stuff and still beat them. Like, they had a really good draw, and we still managed to draw just enough to beat them. In that last game, again, we just needed an answer. Our opponent had some opportune stuff. They even made mistakes like using the Wasteland with a Stifle face up in front of them. But we just couldn't close it, and they drew a Murktide and just killed us in a couple of turns, which happens. All right, let's talk about the deck. So we went 3-2 today. However, the matchup against the Painter, I think we were a little bit unfortunate in the second game that they had the perfect start of Ancient Tomb, Painter, Lotus Petal, Pyroblast, Mountain, Lightning Bolt. They had a very specific set of cards. Now, obviously, that second Lightning Bolt could have been another Pyroblast or whatever, but they needed a relatively specific set of things to stop our turn to 2020 there, and they had it. It was in their deck for a reason, and it worked out for them. So, I think we were a little bit like... It felt more like a 4-1 deck in a lot of ways. Like, we absolutely steamrolled through the first few rounds, and we just sort of come a little unstuck on the end. Now, with a deck like this, you're needing to get a little bit fortunate sometimes. Well, to be fair, to win any Magic tournament or anything, you need to get a little bit fortunate. You can play well and still lose, or you can play well and get lucky. You need a bit of both. So we didn't quite get there today, but the deck feels very solid. I think sideboard wise, I could think of some other things I wanted. So I mentioned I wanted the Veil of Summer. That felt like something that I would kind of want some action from. That feels like it would be useful in a decent amount of situations. Now, it doesn't stop your opponent from sudden edicting you. That's what discard's for. So we could have more discard. We could have more like things like Veil of Summer. There's a lot of options of ways that you can tweak this deck. So we had 3 Steely Resolves because Initiative is the second best deck in the format and is really heavily played. I think when you add up all of the Initiative variants together, they are the most played deck by a decent margin. However, we didn't see any of the Initiative decks, so our Steely Resolves were completely blank, and that's sometimes going to happen with sideboard cards. You're not going to see all the matchups you wanted. I think the Tower of the Magistrate might not be necessary. I think that's a good place to look for cuts. I think you could probably get away without that one. The Dismembers are unfortunately necessary for the Magus of the Moon, and they're also good at killing opposition agent, which is also a bit of a pain. I'm just trying to think if there's another card that's better and does a similar job, but I don't know if I can think of one. Obviously, taking the damage is a lot, but you can cast it through Chalice for 1 mana. You don't need coloured mana to cast it, so it kind of is what we need there. Now, you could always just say, I'm going to lose to Magus of the Moon, and just say whatever, but Painter is one of the top 5 decks at the moment, I think, and you need to have an answer to Magus of the Moon, so I think Dismember is necessary. Maybe we don't need 3 Steely Resolves. Maybe we could trim one of those on the tower and then have a couple of slots in there that we could put some Duresses in, for example. Duresses are something that you'd be boarding in relatively often that'd be quite useful. Or you could have another Pithing Needle, or you could have whatever you felt was necessary. But I actually quite like Dark Depths at the moment as a deck. I think Steely Resolve, when I've played decks that want to make 2020s, has proven incredibly good against the initiative, which was one of the reasons why people weren't really playing this deck that much. Now, there's also an option of not playing blue in this deck. So getting rid of your Stifles and the Flusterstorms. If you do that, you add in a 4th Pithing Needle, and then you get 2 Duresses in your main deck. You can tweak your mana base so that you're getting just green-black lands, so you actually have a bit of so you actually have basics to find. However, a basic forest is not necessarily great in the deck. So what that deck looks like, let me just pull out the lands that you'd be changing if you wanted to go green-black. So we get rid of these, and we get rid of these. So you'd be losing these, and you'd be getting 4 Verdant Catacombs, 1 Forest, 1 Swamp, 2 Bayou. Now, as you can clearly see, that's going to make you a lot worse at casting green spells and Hexmage, because the rainbow lands really help you out for casting green pip into black pip. So I do think the mana base, weirdly, on this build is actually better for casting the spells that we're trying to cast than the straight up green-black version. Even if you were cutting the Stifles to run the Duresses and the 4th Pithing Needle, maybe you still even run the rainbow mana base. I don't know. Maybe I'll probably try just green-black depths on my channel soon. With these lands changed, just to see how it goes, because I absolutely adore this deck. I love making 2020s. This is one of the decks I have in paper. I used to play Slow Depths, which is the Mox Diamond build. I played that for a long time in paper as well before I sold my Mox Diamonds. So I really enjoy making 2020s, as you know from watching my channel. And I do think this deck is actually pretty good. Now, you're going to have a little bit of variance, but you're going to have that with everything pretty much apart from Delver, really, which is why it's the best deck, because it has very little variance, because you get to see so much of your deck every game. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed today's league. It was all right. It kind of, the wheels fell off at the end, but I think it showcased what the deck can do and the lengths that need to happen in order to beat this deck sometimes, because this deck's game plan is very strong, and if you don't interact with it, you will lose to it. So, as we saw, our opponents needed to have very specific interactions in some of the games, and sometimes they're going to have it, and that's fine. Sometimes you don't get there, sometimes you do. But I hope you enjoyed this one, and I'm going to stop talking now, apart from saying like, comment, and subscribe. These things cost you nothing, and they really help me out. All right, thank you very much, and goodbye.